Hello and welcome back, everybody, to another week of Hard Knocks with Read and React. We are watching Hard Knocks on HBO. They are covering the AFC North. I'm sure you're aware of that all by now because the season's over. I don't know if this HBO show is over. I think they're going into the playoffs with these teams, especially with how the episode ended. I wasn't entirely sure, but I believe that's the case. Kind of I'm not going to say the vibes got better this week for the Steelers, but it could be worse when you look around at two of the other teams in the AFC North. So here's my co-host, Rylan. Tell us a little bit about this episode. Let's hit the recap.
Yeah, really not a ton to talk about in this recap. Kind of the general formula, game prep, game stuff after the game. Obviously a big focus on the race to win the AFC North and then just the season ending for the Bengals and Browns. We got some side bits, mainly like players making the Pro Bowl, some cool stuff there. Little like B plot on Mark Andrews dealing with type 1 diabetes, which has always been really interesting and pretty inspiring. And then, yeah, as Ryan touched on, this does not look like it was the last episode, despite the show kind of being advertised as a six episode thing. It just kind of ended, and it looks like we're going to be following the Ravens and Steelers in the playoffs.
Which I'm sure will delight both of those teams as they are now at the most crucial part of any
Oh,
season.
of course, yeah. Just want a camera in
Yeah,
your face for that.
I will say that I do think some of the camera angle stuff can be a little overblown when fans are talking about how big of the distraction is because I do know that especially like in a lot of the meeting rooms, they're not in there with like a camera crew. They came in and installed a bunch of cameras in the room. So while they are aware that cameras are there, and maybe that plays into everyone's psyche in their own sort of way, uh, it's not like they're being hounded 24/7 by a camera person in their face. Maybe on the practice field, but not so much in the rooms, and clearly not so much in their personal lives because we really haven't got a lot of that this year.
Yep, yeah, it's mainly just mic'd up players, as you mentioned, those meeting room cameras, and then like an occasional sit down interview with the coach that, given from what they pull from those, have to last like 10 minutes max. So,
Exactly. I can picture it now. I haven't interviewed anybody at that level, but I've had, coach interviews with players with coaches at the college and high school level. And yeah, I can just imagine the amount of work to even get the clips that they get out of these guys
oh my
that,
gosh,
that those
yeah,
guys have to go through because coaches famously uh, don't like to say a lot. They sometimes like to hear themselves talk, but they don't like to say much.
exactly.
So, we got a lot of Browns this episode. That was interesting. I'm assuming mostly because they are making a quick exit and we're not a very good team this year. A lot of focus on the Bengals this week. That makes a lot of sense because, they were that team that was not guaranteed a playoff spot and they were pushing for it. Ravens were business as usual, and Steelers, was a lot of just trying to reframe their mindset, it seems.
Yeah, I felt like, as you kind of touched on, like the vibe in the Steelers building felt almost a little bit better this week. I probably with a bit more rest, they were feeling a bit better. But still, it's like in those meetings, they were taking this game against the Bengals very seriously. So,
Maybe you can check me on this. As I was watching it, maybe this is just the years of pent-up frustration, but I was honestly like wincing a little bit at some of the Tomlinisms and the Russell Wilsonisms. I was actually like, ugh, this plays a lot better like in episode one when you guys are winning, when you guys are on this losing streak, you know, uh the Russell Wilson standing amongst a group of people but only talking to himself. Mike Tomlin's like using the road is narrow, and it's like, damn, coach, we know the road's narrow. We're getting our ass kicked.
yeah, I mean the Tomlinisms didn't bother me too much. But yeah, some of the stuff that came out of Russ's mouth uh just really didn't feel like it fit the right tone for what the rest of the team was feeling. Like when he was talking to Cam Hayward after the game. And granted, Cam Hayward had the flu, so I don't think he really wanted to talk to anybody.
That's
But
fair.
it just felt like Russ is just like running through this list of like inspiring things to say in his head, and Cam was just like, I just want to go home.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, yeah, he did have the flu last week. And you can't say that he loafed at all in that game. He was like pretty much the guy keeping us in the game for a lot of it. Uh,
Absolutely.
but yeah, I don't know. Like, how are you feeling watching this episode heading into next weekend with the wild card round this weekend coming up?
I don't think it changed my opinion at all. I still think, I mean, look, some weird Steelers Ravens magic is always possible to happen. So I will say that. But I mean, my game prediction, and we have to do that for staff picks for BTSC, I probably have the Ravens winning by 2 scores.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, it's one of those where it's like, that the Steelers can do it. They did it once this season already. It being the first makes you wonder if they just caught the Ravens at a bad time. But I would also say the Steelers were just playing at a different level that first meeting that they have been for the last month. And some of that might be teams figuring out what their very narrow offensive scheme is. Some of it might just be you know, wear and tear at this point in the season. I don't know, but I would put it at my confidence level is like 40% that they can somehow squeak this out, 60% that the Ravens are going to win. And I don't know. We talked a little bit about it in the column this week, but how are you feeling about the QB situation moving forward? Like, I guess let's reframe that. Let's reframe that into a little more
Yeah.
manageable and make it a little more hard knocksy. What do you need to see next week for Russ to return? Is there anything he can do short of taking this team to the Super Bowl that could bring him back in your eyes?
Oh gosh. I mean, I won't say no, but like he's got to play really, really well because we've kind of seen the ups and the downs with Russ this season, and the ups kind of at his peak. We're like, okay, maybe we can bring him back on like a 1 to 2 year sort of short contract, and hopefully he still has some gas in the tank, and then to quote Michael Pierce, that bus is completely out of gas now at this point in the season. So it's like even if he does play a bit better, I mean, short of just this incredible playoff run, I think the Steelers need to realize, like, thanks Russ for your service this year on the vet minimum. It turned out, I think, better than a lot of people thought it would, but it's got to be someone else next year if they're really trying to look for someone who can get them over that, hump, to win a playoff game, win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, that's why I'm curious. At this point, I don't expect it, but I'm curious if they tried to delve into Fields at all in this coming week. I guess that probably will only happen if he ends up playing the game because my bet is they might get the footage and not use it if he doesn't make any kind of relevant appearance, whether that's in a package, whether that's if there's a swap in the game. Um, I don't know. I've said all season that I think that the end results with these guys are going to be pretty the same. It's just going to look different getting there. That's why I've always kind of wanted to just stick with Fields because, we saw where the highs could be when Russ came out the gate. Everyone kind of already knows his game. And I think it's not a surprise that once we've seen some of these teams a second time and also played some of the better teams in the league, they were able to go, okay, we know exactly what what Russ brings and stop it. I think you kind of get a lot of that with Fields too. But the thing is, I just think it's much easier to still somehow squeak some magic out of Fields running around than Russ throwing these, low percentage, really great and amazing when they pay off vertical shots. But like as we've sort of seen he was hitting like seemingly all of them once he started. And now we're kind of seeing that, not to nerd out, but it's the regression to the mean. We're starting to see, hey,
No
he's
boy.
got high percentage shots and he was hitting a lot of them. And now he's still hitting some, like the Mike Williams catch last week was awesome. That got me, out of my seat and hoping that we could get back in the game, you know. Uh, but then we've also seen, I don't know who to play more on the Pickens lurching missed throw.
It's like
I don't know if that was
50-50,
Pickens on a wrong route.
60-40.
I don't know if that
Yeah.
was Russ under pressure missing, but because he was getting hit when he threw that. But it's just you can't. It's a hard way to live. It's a hard way to live.
Yeah, and when, the Russ offense can't really target the middle of the field or intermediate much, all the defense has to do is essentially take away those moon balls, take away some of that short outside passing game, and the Steelers can't really change it up to keep them honest. I think that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah, and I mean it's tough because with both these quarterbacks, it's not that they are never able to do it, right? Because I mean, look at the last Cincinnati game, the first Cincinnati game, I mean. What was Russ doing? He was hitting the middle of the field. He was picking on the linebackers. I don't know why they abandoned that for this game, especially I think one of the starting linebackers was nicked up and they were using a lot of Akeem Gaither or so like Davis Gaither, I think is his name. And I just don't I don't know whether it's the coaching and why they went away from it. I don't know if it's, they realized, hey, Russ was able to click in for one game, but he just doesn't seem to do it. And maybe that's partially because he's like really 5'10", 5'11", and can't see that part of the field super well. But it wasn't like Fields was regularly doing it either. He had a couple games where he would do it, and then when we made the switch, what were people complaining about? Throws not being made. What are people complaining about with Russ right now? Throws not being made. So it's like Steelers are in quarterback purgatory until they get lucky with the draft pick or, something. But that's why I'm kind of open to Fields a little bit this week if we can at least work him into parts of the game because I just feel like if you look around the landscape, short of like taking somebody that is in the mid rounds and turns out, oh wow, no one knew who they were going to be. They have like an early career Wilson arc themselves. Uh, I just don't see where they're going to get a crack at a young QB that isn't Fields.
Yeah. And I mean, to your point, even though I wrote kind of defending starting Russ again this week, which I do believe, but yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing a Fields package from time to time because he does like kind of reliably give them a spark when he's in there. Just because, he gets vertical, he's a good runner. He's still a threat to throw to a certain extent. I mean, if they're stagnating again, why not, right?
For sure. For sure. Wrapping up with this episode, I feel like really the highlights for me, we're seeing that even though the Steelers are on the skid, I think what I appreciated was just seeing the respect that the other AFC North teams kind of have for each other. I mean, sadly the highlight for the Steelers this episode was the Bengals secondary coach saying that we got the bleep kicked. I don't know how we're on YouTube, right? Can we say he just said they got the fuck beat out of him, and and they weren't going to let it happen again. And
Yeah.
you could just see how much it meant to them to not be embarrassed by the Steelers. And you know, maybe we'll get lucky and we'll embarrass Baltimore this weekend.
Who knows? Yeah, I mean the highlight for me, honestly, of like the little moments that we got that weren't just game footage was I hate to say it, but that Myles Garrett Roger Rosengarten moment was actually like super wholesome. I always like seeing those kind of like little in-game bits of players talking to each other. So I'll give Myles Garrett that.
That did trigger in me thinking about a bit of the episode that we haven't touched on yet. We did get a
Yeah.
brief cutaway with Minka Fitzpatrick. It was part of the Pro Bowl stuff, but they didn't really talk to him about the Pro Bowl in his segment. Maybe that's because he's already been quoted as saying he was surprised he got it. But I just thought that was a cool insight into what he's doing. I know that it was just like a little cutaway of him just on an iPad, but they talk to him, and I just think you hear the reason he's sort of the brains behind the 11 on the field, I feel like. And I know people have been crushing him this year because of the lack of splashy plays, but I mean, short of forcing fumbles, I'm not sure what more he could be doing based on the role he's had, which a lot of times is forcing them to go to other parts of the field.
Yeah, yeah, the whole bit about him being like, I don't like wide receivers. It was just
That was really good.
so it's something that you'd expect Minka to say, but we just never really heard him say it like that. So I thought that
And,
that was
and,
a fun
and
little
shout
insight.
out to the HBO crew. for how they cut that because we got Minka talking about how much he hates wide receivers, how they're divas, how they always want the ball, they're always look at me, want attention, and we cut to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins literally just being goofy, dancing at practice, like just like it was a
Yeah.
perfect, it was chef's kiss. Good cut up.
Oh yeah. That and that random shot of TJ Watt just absolutely jump scaring Alex Highsmith in the tunnel, right? That was too good.
Yeah, yeah. Man, that's just a part of the NFL player's psyche that I would love to have more time to just like be around and explore the whole like I mean, if you watched it, it was like he was literally I think he himself has described it as blackout mode
Yeah.
where it's like they just lose themselves and it's just like pure I don't know football indoctrination of sorts where he's just like he's just screaming his head off and he's looking like he's ready to run through a wall and it was cool to see. You love it out of you're out of your star defensive player, but
Absolutely.
it was a funny moment to kind of see. And then man, I wish he had been a little more involved in all this talk with Myles Garrett and Trey Hendrickson this week. I wish we'd had a little more WAP, but that's okay. I don't think he really likes the cameras.
Yeah, I mean, and Watt still, I think, had a pretty solid game against
That's what
Cincy,
I
even
mean.
if it
He had a
didn't
good
show up on
game,
the
so
stat
it's like I
sheet.
would have
Yeah.
liked to see more of him, but I think he likes to stay in the background as much as possible.
Yep.
But with that, I think that wraps another week. I don't really know what to expect going forward. I don't know if we're going to lose teams entirely. You had some ideas about maybe some of the things we'll see.
Yeah, I'm kind of like, are we going to cut out the Bengals and Browns now that we're focusing on the playoff teams, or are we going to get some like exit meetings, end of year stuff of those teams, which I'm kind of torn on which one I want because I do think, we might get some more insight if we narrow it down to just focusing on two teams. Obviously, that means more airtime for the Steelers, but also that kind of end of season process, I think is just fascinating to look into, and so. I guess we'll see, and I'll be happy with kind of whatever we get.
Yeah, I mean, I see both sides. I think it depends on what they do in terms of like I see the argument that if we eliminate the other teams, we'll get more in depth with the Steelers and Ravens theoretically, which that would be awesome if that's what they gave
In
us.
theory, yeah.
However, if we do that and the time that they fill is more of, guys standing around at practice joking, guys, in meeting rooms saying not a whole lot while they hold an iPad, uh, I don't know if I need that as much. So then I would probably like to see some of the other stuff a little more. But I don't know. But yeah, no, I think that wraps it up. And hopefully next week we aren't staring off into the distance like the Bengals coach Zach Taylor was to end this episode.
Sounds good.
All right, we'll see you next week, everybody.